Russia says that it has begun tactical nuclear weapons drills close to Ukraine. Russia's defense ministry says the drills will test its readiness to deploy the weapons. The exercises are taking place in Russia's southern military district. Now, that includes parts of Ukraine under Russian occupation. The Kremlin says that the exercises come in response to what it is calling threats by certain Western officials. Russian officials pointed to recent comments by France's president. He said that NATO should not rule out deploying troops to Ukraine. Well, the military analyst Marina Marone joins me now from the Estonian capital, Tallinn. It's good to see you again. Talk to us a little bit about what these weapons that Russia is testing, what are they?
Good evening, Brand. It's good to be here again. Well, what we have to understand, there is a substantial difference between tactical nuclear weapons and strategic nuclear weapons. So tactical nuclear weapons, or rather warheads, they have a much lower yield, so from 1 kiloton up to about 50. So the destructive power is much less. And then they can be fitted on different missiles that Russia has, for instance, Kalibr missiles or those of the Iskander-M complex, meaning that the range is also limited. So essentially, here we're talking about an exercise of deploying those tactical nuclear weapons, given the much shorter range, in battlefield conditions, rather than what one would expect using international ICBMs to target the likes of the United States.
Marina, why is Vladimir Putin, why is he playing up the nuclear threat now?
Well, we have to go back a little bit and remember that from the very beginning of the invasion of Ukraine, Putin has been shaking his nuclear saber, and every single time the West was trying to supply Ukraine with some weapons, Putin would refer to a potential use of nuclear weapons. And I think that has eroded the deterrent power of at least strategic nuclear weapons for Russia. And now Russia has reached a moment where it needs to reestablish that strategic power of its nuclear weapons. However, it's not all black and white, and he has found this gray area, meaning the tactical nuclear weapons, basically, which could be used in response to European countries deploying troops to Ukraine. And specifically, this is related to statements made by French and British officials.
We know that no country has used nuclear weapons since the U.S. atomic bomb attacks on Japan almost 80 years ago. What do you think it would take for Vladimir Putin to break that taboo now?
Well, the Russian military doctrine is not very clear on the threshold when it comes to using tactical nuclear weapons. So that is an interesting point, because obviously their destructive power is not as great as those of strategic. However, Putin still has to give his okay for these weapons to be used. So even if they're used in battlefield conditions, there is special communication equipment. And so Putin has to communicate it and to give his okay. And I think the threshold for their use is much lower. And I think there is a possibility that that might be considered. However, I don't know what Putin might think. But if he sees that Russia might be losing in Ukraine because NATO decides to deploy troops, and especially if Crimea comes under attack and there is a potential for Russian loss of Crimea, I think that he might just as well order the use of tactical nuclear weapons.
So what kind then of nuclear scenarios would you say that Ukraine and NATO, what kind of scenarios should they be preparing for?
Well, in this case, I think that the nuclear weapons might be used in battlefield conditions. I do not believe that Putin would try using tactical nuclear weapons against NATO members. But again, this is just an assumption. And I think that NATO should be well aware of this. Even if the possibility of their use is very slim, what would NATO response be? Would France use its nuclear weapons as a response? So I think it is necessary to calculate that possibility into the whole scenario with Ukraine, and also perhaps to actually see how NATO comes out of this escalatory ladder where Putin is now raising the stakes. Are we prepared to go one step further or not? So that would be a question for NATO planners.
Yeah, it's a step, of course, that everyone hopes never has to be taken. Military analyst Marina Marone joining us tonight. Marina, as always, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
DW's Eastern Europe editor, Roman Goncharenko, joins us now for more. Roman, good to see you. Russia says that these drills are a response to what it says are Western threats. How seriously should Ukraine and its allies take them?
Well, both are taking those threats seriously, but I do think that in Ukraine and in the West, nobody believes that there is an imminent threat of Russia actually using those tactical nuclear weapons. Because looking at the situation on the battlefield, there is no reason for Russia to do that against Ukraine. Russian forces are occupying new territories of Ukraine, so Ukrainian army is weakened by not having enough ammunition, not enough soldiers. So nothing speaks of Russia using them against Ukraine. But it's just like before, in the past years, it looks like it's an attempt to prevent the West from helping Ukraine more than before, giving maybe certain types of weapons, more powerful weapons, or, as you've said, the mentioning of a possibility that NATO troops, NATO countries, could send troops to Ukraine to help Ukrainian army, for example, in western parts of Ukraine, so not involved in a combat operation, so no immediate contact between NATO troops and Russia. And also, of course, Russia is worried by Ukrainian wish to strike with Western weapons on Russian territory. This could be a serious threat for Russia. So Russia is signaling, don't do that.
And Roman, we report all the time about military exercises being carried out also by Russia. That's nothing new. What may be unusual is the fact that we're talking about tactical nuclear weapons being included in these drills. Tell us a little bit, if you will, about tactical nuclear weapons. Exactly what are they?
Well, indeed, it is not unusual to have those drills. Unusual is that Russia is showing off and explaining, telling the world that it is conducting those exercises now so close to the Ukrainian border. So this is unusual. And also unusual that it's taking place also in Belarus, a neighboring former Soviet republic near Ukraine, where Russia has deployed nuclear weapons only a year ago. Tactical nuclear weapons are basically differ from strategic nuclear weapons by the range. So they cannot fly many thousands of kilometers, miles away. So and they're less powerful. Those are basically two major differences. But the difference, there is a kind of a gray zone. Some Russian technical weapons, like the Iskander missiles, or the newest developments like the hypersonic Kinjal missiles, airborne, they fly hundreds of miles. Whereas sea-launched Caliber missiles can fly thousands of kilometers, which is actually quite a lot. So Russia could launch them from the Caspian Sea, far away from the Ukrainian border. But those technical weapons are meant not to destroy large cities, but rather smaller cities. So it's a weapon of intimidation, I would say. And Russia is not going to use them. This is my estimation, and this is what also a lot of nuclear experts I've been talking to are saying. Russia is trying to threaten the West, not to give Ukraine certain weapons.
DW's Eastern Europe editor Roman Goncharenko. Roman, as always, we appreciate your time and your insights. Thank you.